Support for this News from Lake Wobegon podcast comes from the Sleep Number bed by Select Comfort, the bed that lets you adjust the mattress firmness to your preference, your sleep number, and by Honey Nut Cheerios cereal. Made with whole grain oats, Honey Nut Cheerios cereal can help lower your cholesterol. Honey Nut Cheerios. Be happy, be healthy. Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, my hometown, out on the edge of the prairie. It's been a beautiful summer there so far. So much to see on an ordinary summer day in Lake Wobegon. Duck families walking around the streets of our town. Mother ducks and the little ducklings following behind them. They come right across the street. They cross against the light on an intersection. You can see all sorts of things. You can see little caterpillars that are about a half an inch long. They'll grow dramatically in the next few weeks, and then they'll attach themselves to a stick or to a twig, and they'll form a chrysalis around themselves that's transparent, and 2 weeks after that, they will emerge as monarch butterflies. You can see the amazing thistles growing in our fields. They come right up to your chest, depending on how tall you are, and they are enormous. They have enormous purple blossoms as big as your fist. For centuries, boys have been sent out to cut down thistles and have done warfare against thistles. Boys who have grown old and died, and the thistles are still there. There are more of them than ever. And so you can see who the winner will be in the long run. When all of the buildings of our town have collapsed and the roofs have fallen in, there will be thistles growing out of them. The corn was a little more than knee-high at the 4th of July, and beautiful, beautiful blue skies with just a few clouds in them to preserve the Norwegians against sunburn, and just a slight breeze to make it harder for the elderly mosquitoes. A gorgeous, gorgeous summer day, and the peonies blooming everywhere in town, those gorgeous, extravagant flowers that don't seem to fit right in the yards of Lutherans. Irene Bunsen grows these magnificent peonies, and she takes them down to the Good Shepherd home to give them to the residents down there. She took one down to Mrs. Forsberg the other day, and Mrs. Forsberg gave her a bouquet of paper flowers that she had made herself and colored. And Irene said, "Oh, you don't need to do that," she said. She said, "Oh, I have all the flowers I can use at home." She knew it was a terrible thing to say, to turn down a gift, but she did, because it's so much easier to give than to receive. She turned it away. That's the beautiful thing about getting up early in the morning, which people do now in Lake Wobegon. They go to sleep. It's cool, good sleeping weather in the 50s, and you open your windows and you drift off to sleep. You don't need a quilt over you. You just lie there under a sheet, and the crickets take you to sleep at night, just as they did when you were a child, the singing of crickets. And then the crows wake you up in the morning at 5:30 when the sun comes up, and you lie there trying to talk yourself into going back to sleep. And of course, the more you try to persuade yourself towards unconsciousness, the more awake you become. And so you get up and you walk out at 5:30 in the morning when the sun has just come up, and all of the greens, or this beautiful, fresh green color that you may not notice in the middle of the day when the light is so bright. The world gives itself to you, and there's nothing you can give back in return. You just have to accept it. You may think about writing a poem, but it doesn't matter. Wordsworth wrote that poem already, and he wrote it better than you ever will. This is what you get from a liberal arts education. You lose some of these illusions, you know. You major in English, and it means you don't have to waste your life trying to write the great American novel. Faulkner already wrote it, and it doesn't need to be written twice. You walk out into the freshness of the morning, and Theodore Roethke wrote about this, and Maxine Kuhlman and May Swenson, and so many poets wrote about it. Wordsworth Wordsworth wrote, "There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the vision of a dream." You can't do better than that. And so you just accept it. You just accept the beauty of the world. And you have the same feeling at 5:30 in the morning as you had when you were a child. That's one of the beauties of having children, is that they accept things. They receive gifts. Accept everything you can give them. They'll accept your time as much as you want to give them. Every gift you have to give them, they will accept, and more. They will accept your sanity as a gift. Carl Krebsbach coached his little girls' softball team, and after 3 hours of practice, he had to come back and wrap his head in a cold, wet towel and lie in a dark room on his back and sing Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain until he suddenly started to feel like himself again. I have a little girl who's 10, and she's just exactly the same way. All gifts she's happy to receive, and so we bestow our gifts on them, just as my Uncle Earl did when he took me fishing. I was 10 years old. A permanent memory. I think back now, who talked him into this? Who twisted his arm to take his 10-year-old nephew, this skinny kid with wire-rimmed glasses, out in a rowboat at 5:30 in the morning? At the time, I didn't think of it. I just accepted it. It was so amazing. We were sanctified brethren, and sanctified brethren were different people. They were not Lutherans. We looked on Lutherans as backsliders, as slackers. We were in the army of the Lord, and we were there to do battle for the Lord and to wage battle against personal pride. And for that reason, in the sanctified brethren, it was the untalented who were given music lessons. Children with no ear for pitch, no sense of rhythm whatsoever, were given piano lessons because it was felt that they would be humble no matter what. Whereas those of us who had musical talent, who were blessed with tremendous gifts, were discouraged for fear that we would fall into the sin of pride. And so I was forced to earn my living doing this, for which I have no gift whatsoever. Telling stories. The stories I grew up on were stories, dark stories from when God smote the Midianites. My stories were all violent. They're stories from the book of Revelation and the beast with 7 heads and the 7 trumpets and the very bad person of Babylon. Those are the stories that I heard. No, we were held back for fear that we would be corrupted in the sanctified brethren. And summer was not a joyful time for us. It was a time when you were supposed to witness, and we would take car trips with our family, and we would roll up tracts, little gospel tracts in bright-colored cellophane, and we would toss them out the window of the car near rural mailboxes. The idea that somebody would see them and unroll them and would say, oh, the wages of sin is death. Oh, that's interesting. And pick it up and read it. We had to do this instead of looking at scenery. We had to toss gospel tracts out the window. I sometimes wrote in the margins of mine, "I am being held captive. Forgive us for littering. This was not my idea." And when we went fishing, we took little pieces of paper, little squares of paper on which gospel verses were written, and we dropped them into the water with the idea that the fish would eat them. And so when someone caught a walleye and cleaned the walleye, they would open up the walleye, and here would be a little gospel verse, "For I am the way, the truth, and the life." Oh, I see. I know that, I have believed it, and I have committed myself. And we would read this gospel verse. My Uncle Earl did not make me do that. We went out on this misty morning in a green rowboat. The smell of his coffee, the smell of his Old Spice cologne. a large man sitting in the stern of a green rowboat and a skinny kid pulling the oars and the water dripping from them as I rowed out to the edge of the world, out into the mist. And I put the worm on my hook very gingerly, very gently, and dropped it into the water. We sat there, silent, saying nothing. We were quiet people. We seldom spoke. There was so much not to say. We sat there until the mist burned off. I caught a sunfish, and when I pulled the hook, which he had swallowed, it was with a little piece of paper at the end of it, but it was not one of ours. It was a little piece of paper, and you could just read the ink was all blurred. It said, "Shut up and know that I am God." I put it in my pocket. We rowed back to the dock. He said nothing. The only thing he said that morning was the last thing he said after we'd reached the dock. He said, "If you don't get your pants wet, it means you didn't go fishing." He let me row back to the dock, and I pulled up. He told me to tie the boat up to the dock, and I was just about to, when he stepped across the seats, and he stepped over towards the dock, and he took a long step, a large man holding a stringer of fish and his rod. He stepped onto the dock, and the boat moved away from the dock, and he hung in the air for longer than the force of gravity would allow. It was a miracle. It was the miracle of Uncle Earl. It made the memory permanent. He hung up there, and then he descended gracefully into the water, up to his armpits, and he walked slowly into shore, carrying his cup of coffee high in the air. And he left me with that immortal saying, "If you don't get your pants wet, it means you never went fishing." What a gift for a child. What a great gift. They'll accept everyone. Everyone. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. The Prairie Home Companion, our band, and all, and Mr. Fred Newman, and all, and Susie Boggess are taking off on the Rhubarb Tour. It starts the middle of August, and we go to the West Virginia State Fair, Indiana State Fair, Bismarck, North Dakota, Seattle, Washington, the Santa Barbara Bowl in California. We're going to go down to Des Moines, see how they're doing there at the Iowa State Fair, and out to Salt Lake City, the Red Butte Garden, and Denver, Colorado, and Ocean Grove, New Jersey, that beautiful big Methodist temple, that tabernacle there in New Jersey. We're going to go up to the Vermont, the Champlain Valley Fair, and up to New Hampshire and the Santa Fe Opera, the Oregon State Fair, the Cape Cod Melody Tent in Hyannis, Mass, and Cohasset, Mass, and then be back for the Minnesota State Fair. That's all coming up in August. You can get all the dates and all the information at prairiehome.org. We're going to hit the highway there, kid. The News from Lake Wobegon podcast is brought to you by Honey Nut Cheerios Cereal. Made with whole grain oats, Honey Nut Cheerios Cereal can help lower your cholesterol. Honey Nut Cheerios. Be happy, be healthy.